Ladies, gentlemen, and friends beyond said binary, welcome to Discourse, the Discourse for today, November 24th, 2023. I'm your host, Tristan. It has been far too long since the last time I came on here and talked at you guys for several hours. It has been a month. I don't know if I want to go over like my litany of excuses, but more or less, let me see if I can remember all of these. My last stream was on October 27th, and I took multiple weeks off because on November 3rd, the first week after that, I was en route to Kalamazoo, Michigan, to meet up with Scott, my podcast co-host, so that we could take in Ancient Aliens live. On the 10th, I was then trying to remember all these things. On the 10th, I want to say sick. I believe I was pretty ill. I caught a cold while I was in America, and I was on my ass for quite a while. I'm still not 100% better. And then the week after that, last week, I did not stream because... Oh yes, I did not stream because the daycare was closed for a PD day. And so I had to stay home and take care of Bebe. So, now, at long last, I have returned to fill your lives with whatever it is that I fill your lives with. But yeah, my name is Tristan. I am the host of the YouTube channel Step Back at stepbackhistory.com. And I'm also the co-host of the podcast It's Probably Not Aliens, which you can find at probsnotaliens.com. I stream here on Fridays at noon, every week, theoretically. And if you want to support the stuff that I do, you can do so first by signing up for Nebula at nebula.tv/stepback, or by joining my Patreon at patreon.com/stepbackhistory. Also, anything like super chats are also welcome and loved. But of course, never necessary or required. I try to keep making free stuff as much as I can. My latest video is on the JFK assassination, so this is the first time that I've been able to talk about on stream about how happy I am about the JFK assassination video. It went down really well. People seem to like it. One of my more popular releases in recent months. So I am happy. I am happy it is doing well. Currently sitting pretty at about 31,500 views. Which I think is like my most successful video since I want to say like March, something like that. I haven't had a video do this well since like really early in the year when I had a few very big successes with my Ancient Apocalypse video, my Trans History video, and my Ron DeSantis video. So this is my most successful video since then, which is wild. Anyways, yeah. And my next video, which I just finished the script for last night, and I'll be doing some rehearsals today to film next week, is on the land back movement. And it's called, it's admittedly, it's had to go through a lot of revisions lately because I learned that Americans don't know what the land back movement is. So I had to go a lot more, 101 on the topic than I thought I was going to need to. So the script just finished last night, and I'm going to be doing rehearsals today, then making a shot list, and then hopefully on Tuesday, because Monday is my birthday, and I have tried very hard to make it so I don't have to work on my birthday. On Tuesday I'll be filming, and it'll be coming out next Friday, so a week from today is the hope. We'll see what happens. Time is fickle in that sense. So that's a thing in production at the moment. If you want to submit questions for this or future streams, I guarantee it's going to be this stream because we currently are sitting on a question, which is fun. And yeah, so we'll see what happens. But and the other thing too is that new people, this is your first time watching one of my streams. It's been a very long time that I've been away, so I'm glad that you made it. So hopefully we will have a really good time. So yeah, if this is your first time, please make yourself known in the chat. We've got some really great really great stuff to go with it. So yeah, really great community here that has a lot of great chats, or has really great chats while I talk at a camera. Let's see what we got here. Got a couple. Before we get into the wins, I'm just going to quickly look at the chat. You went to the Ancient Aliens thing, right? How was that? We should be getting a podcast to that degree coming out next week, I want to say. The answer is that it kind of felt depressing and kind of like I was a little bit scared. It kind of was the closest thing I'll ever get to being inside of a Trump rally. So that was a little weird. Why do I hate Doomers? Because Doomers are just as much trying to prevent positive action in the world as the people that are our ideological enemies. So anti-Doomer action it's good to do. Tabletop friends like the JFK video. That's good. Yeah, I'm proud of the JFK video. There was a way that I approached it. See, here's the thing about the JFK video. I had a very tight way that I could handle it. You know, man, I'm really struggling to say the things to speak properly. This is what happens when you don't stream for 3 weeks. Okay. So I had a very particular way that I wanted to cover the topic. First of all, after my last video was over an hour long, I really needed to rein back the length of my videos. I'm trying very, very hard to decrease the length of my videos and keep my 1 hour long epics to maybe 1 in 3 videos instead of every video. So I needed to keep the script down to under 5,000 words, basically. And the thing is that JFK is one of those things where there's been 6 decades of people writing about conspiracy theories. And there's the expectation, if I was going to debunk the JFK conspiracy, would be to deal with hundreds, thousands of written pages of people who are cherry picking, massaging, or using bad evidence to make their case. And I realized that there would be no there is no responding to all of those. It's impossible. There's just too much stuff. It's like the 9/11 truth movement. The people who went into investigating it because they believed in the conspiracy have an a priori knowledge. They just assume. They know there's a conspiracy, at least to their minds. They know there's a conspiracy, and so they were just setting out to prove that the conspiracy is real. But they have done so much work that it is overwhelming. And it just is it dominates the entire discourse around it because not a lot of people, investigated who shot JFK who genuinely weren't invested in a conspiracy theory. So you don't actually get a whole lot of useful information. You get a lot of bad takes. Now, so I decided, I was how do I attack something then in under 4,700 words? And the trick that I went with, the tactic that I decided to go for was to look at it from more of a big picture and more answer, how would you investigate something like the JFK conspiracy? So it was more about well, we need to understand the context it happened in, why a conspiracy might have shown up around it. We have to look at why people have inconsistent eyewitness accounts about it that often are the crux of a lot of conspiracy theories. And also the way that our mental heuristics work. And I thought I came up with a pretty decent thing. I didn't get into some of the other stuff that I think I should have in retrospect about, like, if you did want to kill the president, you know, doing so with a, like, you know, at a big event with a lot of people in a very flashy way by shooting him in the head on live television is not exactly a way to, like, commit a conspiracy theory or a conspiracy, like, you know, an assassination, if you don't want a whole lot of attention being drawn towards it and people having a whole lot of questions asked about it. And that if the CIA or FBI or whoever they say actually did it, wanted JFK dead, which again, the reasons why are usually pretty murky, but also the reasons that, like, the things that they usually wanted out of JFK's assassination could probably be much easier and much less dangerously, because, you know, anybody, if the CIA got, like, you know, nailed for killing JFK, then they would be executed for treason. So like, there's other ways that they could have gotten, like, you know, their foreign policy desires or things like that that would have not required literally killing the president of the United States in a big, dramatic, televised event. That would have been, you know, there's, like, you know, there's ways to kill somebody that are not that. And also, furthermore, like, there's a much longer and more established history, as I've kind of talked about in my presidential assassination series so far, where when presidents get shot in public in front of everybody, it's usually by a person who's rather mentally unwell, who either is deluded to the point where they don't think that they'll get caught, or they don't care that they'll get caught, despite the fact that it would, you know, their chances of being arrested and you know, executed for said crime is about 100%. Because there's no way that, like, the investigation for the person who killed the president is ever going to, like, you know, be abandoned or anything like that. Or that any, like, you know, country that values its life would actually, like, you know, harbor a president like that, or harbor an assassin like that. So it typically falls into people who are able to circumvent all of that stuff because they don't work in intelligence networks. They don't follow the rules, and they can, like, get past a lot of their security measures and do that. And that's sort of like the main reasons why I'm, like, not super convinced that, like, the CIA would have killed JFK, because if the CIA killed JFK, one, it probably would have leaked by now, and two, they would have tried something a little quieter. Yeah. That's about the most of it. How did I learn about Americans don't know about land back? You asked around or had proofreaders? Yeah, I sent it to, I was, like, working on it, like, I was workshopping titles and thumbnails with, like, you know, fellow creators who are American and aren't, like, deeply mired in political YouTube spaces. And every single time I did that, like, every single time I proposed a title or a thumbnail, their first words were like, I have zero clue what land back what you're talking about with land back here. I don't know what this is. I am confused. And then when I put up my first thumbnail design for it, the response from some people was like, that looks like a music video. So I've had to, like, really, like, I've been doing a lot of tinkering with the thumbnail designs to make the video, to make everything work the way that I wanted to. So that's where I'm at. And so there's been a lot, and that has informed me, because my audience is over 50% American, to tinker and mess with my process so that the script is more about teaching people even what land back is, let alone, like, you know, what it's going to, like, what it was intended to do. It was originally intended to just talk about, like, even though, you know, I'm too much of a coward to get, or whatever you want to call it, to get involved with, like, Twitch bullshit. But basically the video started as me just wanting to make, like, my second or third video where I talk about why Vosh is wrong about something, because he doesn't do any research and he just goes by his gut instinct, which is usually wrong, and just thinks that that's fine to go with. Anyways, that's a whole different kettle of fish, I suppose. Yeah. So that's like my so by shopping around the title and thumbnail and finding out that not a lot of people knew about Land Back was, you know, good. And then maybe and the amount of the video that got taken up by me talking about why, surprise surprise, Vosh poorly researched something and was wrong, it gets making smaller, which will probably end up in a more successful video overall. So yeah. Thank you for making shorter videos. I know that long videos can be more fully explain things, but I don't always have time to watch long videos. Yeah, I agree. And I've been told that, like, you know, the idea that the really long videos are more normalized is because of the chapters feature on YouTube. But I have also seen some very credible stuff that shows that the chapters feature on YouTube results in higher lower retention rates for viewership too. So using that like chapters feature on YouTube results in fewer people actually watching the whole video, which means that it's not exactly the wisest thing to put in your video. And so I would rather make shorter videos on more tight and concise topics and maybe return to the same subject more times than make like one definitive video that's like really, really long. Unless I plan on it, on like the content of it actually needs to be that long, which like right now, if I were to just shoot the script that I have for my Land Back video, it would be close to an hour long because I got carried away. I think the script is something like 8,500 words, and 4,700 words is about a half-hour long video, so we'll see. I also have two endings, one for Nebula and one for YouTube, so that also, you know, affects the full length in a way, but I don't know exactly how long it's gonna. It's gonna be probably in the 45 to 50 minute range anyway. I like Chill Goblin's video on the subject of the JFK assassination. Yeah, Chill Goblin actually reached out to me when he was researching that video, and I gave him some stuff to read. So I also like it. Older family members obsessed with JFK and Diana's. Let me see if we got anything before wins. All right, you know what? Vosh is the new PragerU. Yeah, for real. Okay, so why don't we do wins? So this is the thing that we haven't done anything in a long time because I haven't streamed in a while, but wins are a thing that this stream gets into some pretty fucking dark ass topics. And, you know, the world can be a very bleak place sometimes. So I think that it's really important that in every stream we embrace the anti-doomer action mentality and talk about things that are going well for us or for the world or whatever. So, you know, celebrate our wins, celebrate big and small, you know, new jobs, but also overcoming resistance and taking care of yourself. All are welcome, all are celebrated. So we talk about a lot of things in that sense. Your son is learning to talk. He's 2. Ah, so is mine. Well, he'll be 2 in January, but yeah, he's also like learning to talk. And just the daycare keeps telling us like your son talks a lot, like a lot. And at home he talks a lot too. He it's not always all comprehensible, but he does talk a lot. So that's fun. All right. So we got Matt Lipton's got a few. For W's, this is a few weeks old, but you finally finished reading Invincible. I got into the series way back in high school, and it's a major influence on my tastes. And now that I've finished it, you know, I don't own the comics of Invincible. I've obviously been watching the Amazon show, and I've been enjoying it quite a bit. And I gotta say, I want to read the comics actually quite a bit because I like Invincible. I like Invincible a lot. There's so many like to the point where it's the sort of like inverting the superhero genre in a like it's like a sort of like the twisted sort of critique of the superhero genre by making it dark and gritty or something like that is it's fair. It's so done these days that it has almost become a tropey like subgenre in and of itself. And what I really like about Invincible is that it's playing in that space of being like, what if we did superhero stories, but they were, you know, dark and gritty and like had intense themes and stuff like that? Because Invincible is really fucking dark and really fucking intense and has like some like absolutely insane amounts of like gore and it goes into like really heavy things about what the real implications of having superpowered individuals on Earth would be. But there's a key distinction that I think that Invincible does that a lot of these other ones don't, that I think I appreciate a lot, which is that a lot of these like inversions of the superhero genre usually seem to be a rebuking of the tropes of the field. Fairly often, like when I think about like The Boys, right? Like The Boys is a very cynical take on the superhero genre. And, you know, you could also say that there's a little bit of that in like Watchmen, that it oftentimes the big things that it does is that it takes a cynical look at the concept of superheroes and like the desires, like the things that superheroes do in their stories. What I like about Invincible is that it does the like grim, or not grim dark, but it does the like dark and intense and mature look at the superhero genre, but it is still fundamentally from a place that like we don't hate superheroes. Like superheroes in a lot of the superheroes in Invincible are still heroes who have a motive to save lives and make the world a better place. It's just that, you know, there's like, and also that it like takes its own setting seriously, and it just, what it does is that it then takes that, but then puts another layer on to make it much more human and much more intense. Like, I don't want to give too many spoilers away because there's like, you know, a really, really big plot twist in Invincible. But like it, when like, you know, when these like big superhero battles happen that kill tons of people and destroy cities, Invincible shows like the real costs of that and the sort of ways that these things can shatter families and make things happen. But it also just has fun with like, you know, the science fiction weirdness that is the superhero genre. So I like that it manages to be a new take on the superhero genre without being necessarily a complete rebuking or a cynical reevaluation of the entire thing, which I like a lot. It's like it's yeah. Yeah. Minmath cleaned up a bunch of stuff and has been sitting in upstairs hallway for months. That is sweet. That shit's, man, keeping your house clean it is a fucking project, I gotta say. Matt Lipton also had 3 days in a row of completing your Pomodoro list this week. This would have finished last night, but ADHD caught up with you. Good on you. Yeah, I've been getting back on Pomodoros this last couple weeks, and that is probably the reason why my video is on track and I'm not panicking and working all night and all weekend to get my stuff done. Victor made amazing food for the potluck at your bar last night. Everyone loved your potatoes, and I was the only person that brought greens, veggies, not weed. Nice. Good on ya, man. Potlucks are making something that can appeal at a potluck is complex, and if you can pull it off, holy shit. Yeah, pretty good stuff. All right, Jupiter's Legacy. You like Invincible and The Boys / Gen V a lot, but they're definitely different vibes. Yeah, I'm not saying that I dislike The Boys. The Boys is also like a really good show. The only thing about The Boys that I have critiques of is that The Boys is, and this is sort of a thing I'm noticing about a lot of comic book adaptations that are going to be a problem, especially going forward, which is that because a lot of the comic book adaptations are of comics that and storylines that are, you know, older, you're going to run into a bunch of problems trying to make a story that is very obviously of a very different cultural moment, make sense and be like good in the context of modern culture. And the first season of The Boys had that problem where it is so obviously of the moment of like the Bush years. Like, I had never even read The Boys comic book, but watching the first season, you can almost exactly pinpoint the period that it came out in, which was basically like the early 2000s in the Bush administration. Because when it's talking about like the greatest threats being like evangelical Christians and like, you know, governments that are lying to get themselves into wars, it's like, oh yeah, this is just this. The Boys is entirely about the Bush administration. I get that. But then in subsequent seasons, when they introduced like more issues that have to do with modern times, it got a lot better on that front. But like I always say that about like there's another one that I kind of had that same issue with, which was I think it was like, well, I guess like there's a couple characters in the Marvel comics that are in the Marvel movies that had that issue, like Scarlet Witch and Black Widow, where like they don't make sense in a modern context because they are both characters that have like a lot of their identity is steeped in the Cold War, and that they when there isn't a Cold War, they get kind of confusing, which was really weird. Why like WandaVision was like supposed to be like, there was this flashback for WandaVision where she was like experiencing the collapse of her communist country, but watching like Malcolm in the Middle, where it's like the timeline of that doesn't line up super great, but either way. All right. Bubbles, your W is that you are finally sober and getting help after 2 years of extremely heavy daily cannabis abuse. That is amazing. I said once that like I want to make a version of Twitter where the only posts on it are people posting two things. One, like addiction recovery milestones. Like all they can post is two things. Anniversaries of being clean and anniversaries of being on HRT. Those are the only two things you can post on that site. And I feel like that would be, because those are my two favorite types of posts to see on like your Twitters or your Blue Skies or whatever. And I want a website that's just those. Tarbox is first, another W. The first leg of your housing upgrade started a few weeks ago. Nice. CMS having a PD day with your youngest. They're playing card games. Awesome. Oh yeah, because it's my birthday, and I got a little bit of extra money from a thing. I bought myself a board game, or a card game, I guess I would say. And I haven't played it yet, but it's a card game that I'm also excited about. I think it's called Air, Land, and Sea. It's like a World War II 2-player card game. I saw it on Shut Up and Sit Down, and I thought it was really cool and, you know, affordable. So I put it on my list of like treats to get myself. But because Step Back isn't making that much money these days, I have been basically I have had to cut off basically all spending except for bills. So I haven't been buying myself any treats. I haven't been like, you know, not even. I even like did the millennial the thing that the boomers kept telling us to do. I haven't like bought coffee in months. I haven't like bought any object for myself ever for probably a like better part of a year at this point. And so it was nice to be able to get myself a little thing like that. I guess another win on that front too, since the last time we've met, is that even though I haven't bought stuff for myself in a very long time, a lot of things that I either kickstarted or pre-ordered like over a year ago came out, and I got like three surprise treats this month that were things that I had like kickstarted or pre-ordered like over a year ago, and then they just showed up one day, and that made me really happy. Because people are going to be curious, I'll list them all. One, Flea Mortals, the Matt Colville D&D monster book. Just in time for the fact that I'm basically done with Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition at this point. Two, I got Sly Flourishes, or the Lazy Dungeon Masters Forge of Foes. Again, just in time for me to be done with D&D, but a really cool book on how to make custom monsters for your 5e game. Yay. Luckily, I now have my weekly RPG game is Pathfinder, where they have had those rules to make your own monsters for ages. So I'm not losing anything anyway. And then I also kickstarted a board game called Hot Potatoes that showed up at my door, and I pre-ordered a game called a book called So You Want to Be a Game Master by Justin Alexander, who's like this like kind of RPG blogger that I really like, and it's like this big chunky book that I got. And yeah, so I got all of those. Made me very happy. Alrighty. Let's see. Paul's W is that they bought a bunch of stuff this week. While not super rampant consumerism should be celebrated, it was all items I needed and were either putting off or not sure what to buy before. Nice. That is also awesome. Hydra. Got diagnosed with ADHD and now have to rethink your life, and brain can be weird sometimes, but stop stressing about things too. Yeah. That shit's great. Finding out that you have ADHD is very empowering, because it stops taking away things that struggles that you have. It stops essentializing them as, oh, this is because I'm bad at doing things, and it's just that, oh, I have a condition, and I have to structure my life in a way that benefits that. And luckily, people with ADHD have been spending a lot of time figuring out how to be productive and still, have the condition. So there's a lot of support out there for you, and more all the time. Zemeth wrote a new song. That is so cool. K-Cloud did a campaign, doing a campaign against the right-wing new constitutional proposal. That's your win for the week. Nice. I still haven't watched Gen V. I don't watch a lot of TV, unfortunately. Booked a vacation for this winter. I haven't left Canada in the winter in 40 years. I'm going kayaking in Chile on one of my bucket list rivers. Nice. That's awesome. That sounds really fun. Is my kid talking yet? It's, talking is a spectrum. He is talking. He is talking a lot. He doesn't stop talking, actually. But how much of what he says is intelligible is complicated. He knows a lot of words, and he points to a lot of things, and he can name a bunch of things and make a bunch of animal noises, and he can communicate some basic things, but he's not speaking in full sentences or anything like that. Which is about what you expect for someone who is turning 2 in like a month or two, so. Haven't caught the stream in a while, so doing this is a win for you. Awesome. Well, I haven't done this stream in a while, so that's a win for me. I got really, really ticked off at the fact that I wasn't able to stream for 3 weeks in a row. That's real bad Tristan things to do. But I'm happy now. I'm back on track. And I will say, in the last 3 weeks, I've changed up my workflow quite a bit to be much more productive and much more on top of things. I don't know if anyone is interested in my kind of workflow stuff, but one of the things that I've gotten into doing was sprints, where I was trying to find a way to balance my long-term projects versus things that are immediate and urgent right now. And so what I did is I have like all of my concurrent streams, right? Like I have a bunch of different projects that are spinning. You know, you've got It's Probably Not Aliens. You've got all my different RPG campaigns. I've got Step Back. And I've also kind of one of the things that I'm doing now is that at all times I'm working on like this month's Step Back video, but I'm also going to be working on a quarterly video that's going to be more big and ambitious. So I always have that video on the go as well. Then I have, on top of that, I have I have some other projects that have yet to come out. So sitting on that, but one of them is that I want to start making shorts for Step Back videos. And ones that are not just like, you know, taking a clip from a Step Back video and putting it out as a short, but like something that is like produced and educational and in a tight 60 seconds. And I have another project that I probably shouldn't talk too much about until I actually have a more solid idea of what it's going to be. And on top of that, I decided to also take an hour at the beginning of my evening when I'm not working to work on creative projects, things that are not, you know, work, money-making things. And like, you know, at the moment, it's stuff like that fiction project that I was telling you about, but it's also my like RPG prepping and like all that kind of stuff. So all that has been very fun. Ralph is me. I started reading again. It's going to be slow, but I'm moving forward. That is also cool. I have also started reading again. I'm trying to get to... I'm trying to read 40 books this year. And it looks like I might just make it. And I just finished... One of the things that I'm doing over the next year is there's a bunch of books that I, quote-unquote, read as audiobooks. And I kind of realized that... in something kind of embarrassing in moment with Lindsay Ellis earlier this year, that books that I read through audiobook, I had a much lower retention on. And so I'm now taking all of the books that sort of during the beginning of the pandemic I read as audiobooks and returning to them and just reading them as text. Because audiobooks to me now are just for like educational and self-help type books instead of like, you know, fiction. And now fiction is primarily going to be done with you know, just reading. And so I just recently finished Parable of the Sower, which I read again, so that I actually like read it and, you know, ingested it, digested it. And that was good. And now I'm reading this really cool book called The Jasmine Throne, which is a fantasy novel. I also made a whole system so that I am never reading too much of like the same type of author, the same genre of book, the same length of book. Like, I don't think I need to get into this too much because people will find this really boring, but I like made a whole system where all of the books in my collection are scored based on like how many more or less pages does it have than the book I'm currently reading? Is it a different genre than the book I'm currently reading? Is the book that I'm reading and this book from an author who has a different race, gender, ethnicity, or like you know, LGBTQ plus representative status or anything like that? So that, and also, is there like am I like, you know, working towards completing a book series and things like that? And I kind of give everything points based on that and choose what's at the highest. And so I'm really happy to like have something like that so that I'm encouraging more variety in my book. And I just finished Parable of the Sower, and I am excited to, like, I read Parable of the Sower. I will probably read Parable of the Talents later. I am a little bit concerned about reading Parable of the Talents, though, because Parable of the Talents is part 2 of a trilogy that Octavia Butler unfortunately died before she could complete. So I'm worried that like Parable of the Talents is going to end on some kind of cliffhanger, and then I'm never going to find out how it ends, which makes me a little sad. Another win. I would say this is like a Pyrrhic win, but I had my friend, as you guys probably remember, I had some friends who moved away to Australia and left me their car, and I've been realizing that like earlier this month, since our last stream, I drove for the first time in 17 years, and I didn't die, and I actually it was a lot easier than I remembered. So I've now driven a few more times, and I'm getting used to getting around town in the car, which is really fun. So that makes me happy. Let's see. You watched some of Thought Slime's video about Shu. He was way more generous to her than I would be, but I guess he was worried about idiots who believe she's really changed. Yeah, I mean, if you are a left-wing YouTube creator, she and the V word are two people who act extremely shitty a lot of the time, and if you speak up too much about them, you get a whole lot of hatred from the sort of what's it called? This sort of type of person who consumes this kind of content, who really likes that kind of content creator, and it's you have to be very careful because they have massive audiences and are very, very malicious. So there is that. Another win is you're gonna have pizza for dinner, Paul. That's amazing. I'm excited because I am also having biryani for dinner, and I love biryani so much, so I'm excited for that. It's interesting. I'm the opposite. You retain way more with audiobooks. That's awesome, Malcolm. That is great. I would love if I could retain more with audiobooks. Audiobooks, I can retain facts and information because if my attention drifts, I can come back and kind of pick up from where things were going on because it's explaining the same ideas, and it's not based on a constant continuity of events. Fiction, if I drift away, I will have trouble figuring out what's going on, and the more I get lost, the less I retain, and by the time I finish a book, I have absorbed all of the events of the book, but I just don't have much of a I don't have much going on in my head that can actually I can actually remember later. What happened is most of this is private stuff, so I won't go into too much detail, but during VidCon this year, I spent a good amount of time with Lindsay Ellis because one of the things that we talked about is the fact that I read her books. I don't know if I can see them from here. You can kind of see right there. She gave me signed copies of her two books. And I talked about the books. And like I said, I read your books. I really liked them. They were good. We talked a lot about her novels and such, and some really good kind of back and forth on that. She mentioned too to me that the audiobook has you missing out on some really cool stuff because especially in the second one, because there's a bunch of interesting text, sort of fake web pages and news articles and stuff like that you miss out on. And so that happened. But then at a party a couple days later, she introduced me to her audiobook editor, or her audiobook producer, and is who she named a character after in the book. And she was like, look, it's this guy. And I was like, who? And she's like, from the book. And I'm like, oh shit. And that's one of the main characters of the book. And I was like, fuck, that was embarrassing. So, I'm going to reread these books sometime in the next year or so. So that's yeah. Do I use Obsidian? You've gotten into it this year, and I'm currently having a personal note-taking stuff. I like Obsidian's cool. So if anyone doesn't know, Obsidian is basically a system for taking a bunch of local markdown files and turning them into almost your own private little internet site with a bunch of cool tools for organization. I will say, Hydra, I am not an Obsidian user, and you'll be very disappointed to know that I am a very dedicated and have been for many years Notion user. And to the point where I store the questions for this stream in a Notion database. So I apologize. I am not based. I am indeed a cringe Notion user. But Obsidian is pretty cool, and I like the idea that maybe someday I might have to transition to it, because if Notion ever goes down, I lose everything. While, Obsidian is like, you own your own data and you own all of the files, so But I like Notion because I can use it on my phone, and it's got a lot of really cool features and automations and stuff like that I don't know if Obsidian's ever gotten to. So 17 years, almost old enough to drink. Yeah, I had not. A few weeks ago, I drove a car for the first time since I was 17 years old, which was indeed 17 years ago. Because Tristan is going to be 35 on Monday. So it had been a very, very long time. It was the first time I had driven since the Bush administration. And it did not go as bad as I thought, which was nice. Got your brother a pizza stone for his 35th birthday. Ooh, nice. I thought Obsidian was a kind of glass. I mean, okay. Yes. Obsidian has a sync utility that transfers between your phone and PCs, but it costs a bit too much. Still very useful, yeah. If Notion works for you, there's no shame in using it. I've seen Obsidian customization turn into a part-time job. Yeah, it's kind of like Linux, right? Like, Linux is like one of those things where it's like, Linux can be extremely powerful for multiple different purposes if you are willing to put a lot of time into making it work. Even Notion's got a bit of that. Like, Notion can appear very overwhelming and useless, and if you don't know how to make it work. But if you're willing to watch a whole lot of Thomas Frank videos and play around with the new tools they release, they just released a bunch of tools that have to do with automation and a bunch of stuff in their sort of coding program. They have their database functions and such. You can do a lot of really, really cool stuff. Like that whole thing I have for my books. That whole thing I have for my books is a Notion database using a bunch of automations and functions to score all of these books based on all those different factors. So I'm going to do some stuff where I do that, and I did one for books. I'm going to do one for my actual play shows that I'm following, because I just finished Exandria Unlimited Calamity, which was really good, and now I'm going and catching up on Oddity Roadshow. I don't know if anyone's ever seen Oddity Roadshow. It's Shannon Strucci is on that show. It's really good. Yeah, what else is there? Yeah. Notion's good. I get a lot out of it. Yeah. What else is going on? Does anyone have any more wins? Should we close the book on wins? But does anyone have any more wins? Not as harsh on the other person. My take on Shu is the same as the I don't speak German guys. I think she's a reactionary who realized Medicare for all would be nice. I also think she's just kind of dumb. I think I will take Matt's stance on a good chunk of it, which is that I don't know how to speak for. I don't know how to. I don't know. What is her name? Is it June or something like that? Isn't it? I just don't. I don't like the. I hate the sort of internetism of calling a human being shoe on head. But June is the problem with a lot of people like her and me and basically everybody in her sort of thing is that I feel like I luckily kind of skipped a lot of this because I got into politics when I was a teenager, and when I was a teenager there wasn't social media. But it means that I've had many years to develop my political identity, while a lot of people, especially people on kind of the content creator politics space, got into it very, very young, or not very, very young, but they got into it as young people in their early 20s, maybe even late teens. And that's a period where, you know, you are still very much figuring out your political identity, and you might have drastic changes in the way that you see the world. And if you're making content, you develop a audience around that, and you get into a situation where you become very, like, there's a lot of disincentives to change or admit that you're wrong on any political issue, because you're going to have people come for your blood. So that is like, that's sort of like my role on it, is that I don't know much about June. I don't really make a note to follow these kinds of people, but my guess is that June is on a political journey, but unfortunately she's doing so in front of an audience of hundreds of thousands of people, and means that, you know, any like opinion that she might say regret in 10 years is going to not only be immortalized, but she's going to have a strong financial disincentive to you know, grow past that. And that isn't to say that you shouldn't take responsibility for the shit that you say on the internet, but that's the way that, like, with my extremely limited knowledge of this person, that's like my best guess as to, like, that's kind of part of it. There was still MySpace. That is true. I did have MySpace when I was a teenager, but I feel like I didn't post politics things on MySpace. When I started getting into political stuff, it was like 2003. So 20 years ago. And I don't even know if we had MySpace back then, but if we did, it wasn't like, you know, like I became a, I will say I became an anarchist in 2009 when I was 20 years old, which was also, like, if you think about it, that was also a long ass time ago, and before a lot of people who are currently, like, you know, political online content creators really understood politics or really cared about politics in any big way. Because, and so, like, I feel like I've gotten very lucky because I haven't had to many times, like, you know, like, since I started making content on the internet, have like this major change of position on things, that then I have to, like, skirt around because I've cultivated an audience that will be mad if I don't do it. The closest that I've had to that is that I break from, I think that, I mean, I talked about this in like every stream for the last like 6 months, and I was informed by people who care about me a lot that my position is a little bit, my characterization of the mainstream opinion on this is a little unfair. And that is that I obviously break a little bit from the pack of, like, online leftist content creators when it comes to my position on artificial intelligence and large language models. But I've been told that my take on it is, my take on their take is more extreme than it actually is. Based on the fact that, you know, I don't get to, we don't like we don't have meetings. We don't like swap notes on how everybody feels about everything. And I just kind of see from, like, the online takeosphere a sort of reactionariness to AI stuff that I think is immature. But I kind of had somebody give me a very stern talking to that was like, I was doing like the equivalent of like when right-wing people say that left-wing people want to ban all guns. And it was like, no, they just want sensible gun control. They don't want no guns. And so I guess I'm like, okay, yeah. Most people don't want no AI. They just want rules on AI, which is, you know, that is exactly the way that I would say that I would like it. But I don't know, if weird that I feel out of place on that take, but maybe that's just more of a me problem than a world problem. You're hoping that there was a big secret meeting hall where all the lefties meet up? Yeah, like, that's true. I am. There was the closest thing that I've ever been to that, and it's dead now, But there was a time where there was a group DM on Twitter that was it was a bunch of like left-wing content creators that lived in the Toronto area. So I think it was even called like the secret Toronto leftist like conspiracy or something like that. But it was really like anybody who lived in the Toronto area knows that we did the occasional like fan meetups. We did those every so often, and we just used that to organize that. But it was for several years, it was just like a group chat that had a handful of people that were all left-wing content creators who lived in Toronto. Probably the ones you would recognize the most was like I was there, Mexi was there, Matt/Mildred was there, Chill Goblin was in there, Jose was in there. But we mostly just used it to coordinate these kinds of meetups. We didn't use it to like, determine what our take was going to be. Literally introduced politics by Rage Against the Machine against the Battle of Los Angeles album. Hey, that works. Paul V only became a leftist in 2017. Yeah, that's true of a lot of people our age. I got into it very early, and also I'm old, as we're learning. 2009 was a lonely time to be an anarchist, at least where I am. That is true. To the point, I'll tell you, Witch Pixels. When I became an anarchist, here was my thought process. I became an anarchist without knowing about Peter Kropotkin or like the conquest of bread. I actually found out about those after I became an anarchist. So what was happening was in 2009, I was really I was watching a lot of YouTube. I was 19 years old, watching a lot of, or I was 20 years old, watching a lot of YouTube. And I took in a lot of just content from random people. And one of the things is that in like the late 2000s, there was a lot of ANCAPs on YouTube that were they weren't just like trying to talk about all of their like neo-Nazi ideology, which it turned out all of them just were Nazis. But at the time, there was like this legitimate like political discourse of ANCAPs talking about, not like complaining about SJWs, like their main thing was like talking about like all of their pitches for their anarcho-capitalist society. And I watched them not because I really bought into any of the things that they believed in, but I thought that some of like the sort of cognitive reframing about the role of the state was interesting. I think I mentioned this on stream because I have an email that I wrote like 15 years ago to Stefan Molyneux, because he was one of the few voices in sort of the free domain radio era. And I was asking like, hey, have you ever heard of anything that's kind of like what you believe in, but like from like a left-wing perspective, like a communist sort of perspective? And he gave me some sort of shitty answer that I couldn't remember. But that sort of, I kind of like listened to that idea about like, challenging the authority of the state. Like, because until then I had just taken the state for granted. Like it was just like I was a fish in water. Like that was my only concept of a state. Or a state was just like the default concept. And so I kind of came to a position and was like, well, you probably could organize a society that does not necessarily need a state, but doesn't necessarily need capitalism either to maintain things. And then I started doing homework on that. I started doing homework on that, and that's when I started finding out about Peter Kropotkin and the conquest of bread and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, for the most part, that's just like, that sort of took me for a ride. You may be older than me, you were just late to the party. I turned 35 on Monday, so you can age yourself appropriately. But I also think that like for example, Matt/Mildred is older than me, and he came into political stuff because of the 2016 election and Bernie Sanders. I think that there's a lot of people who people's political awakening does not necessarily happen at a specific time in their lives. Usually it happens because politics comes to them for one reason or another. I just happened to get into it when I was really young because, I don't know, might have something to do with 9/11 happening when I was 12. I don't know. But the Iraq War really pissed me off, so that kind of got me into it. So let's see. I live in a country with no guns, and I'm not sure I'd feel comfortable in a country where everyone is just carrying them around. So ban all guns isn't so much an extreme take to me, it's just how it is. I mean, I live in a country where there is gun ownership, but it's still like responsible. Like, we don't have as many mass shootings as the U.S. does, not even close, because even though we don't have, like, our gun laws aren't that restrictive, because I think there's like a cultural aspect to it that we don't talk about much. But either way, that's a different thing. That's a different concept. Charlottesville is kind of your big mass scale awakening moment. Yeah, I remember when Charlottesville happened. I could see that. And the thing is that I think that, like, we live in much more politically charged times too. Like, I made that whole video last year. Was it last year or 2 years ago? Where I said the political compass must die. Where that video was directed at the kind of young person, specifically, I think, young boys who have had a very recent political awakening when they are still teenagers. And in their process of having their political awakening, I don't know if, like, people, you probably see these people on the internet. I don't exactly know how to define them as, like, a category of person. But, like, I remember seeing, like, this tweet from somebody who was talking about their political journey. And this was somebody who couldn't be older than, like, 17 years old. But, like, in the last year, they freely admitted that in the last year, they had held, and they made this list of like 13 different political tendencies, and they were all very extremist. Like they were like talking about being like a fascist at a certain point, at being a monarchist at a certain point, and like being being a sort of Stalinist and like Hoshiist or whatever. And it was just like this it was just like this long list of these extremely radical political ideologies that they said they held in the last year that were all like very mutually exclusive and had nothing in common with each other. And and when I heard about that, and I have a friend who has a teenage son who is amazing young man, love him to death. But he talked about how he was on a Minecraft server where they had the world split into the 4 political compass quadrants, and they sort of lived according to the principles of the quadrant in those areas. And all of that to me was like trying to be like, there's something really weird happening with young boys who are getting really into politics as a sort of like they're getting into politics in the same way that like when I was a teenager, people were getting into like, you know, what kind of genre music you identified yourself with. And I was curious about that because, you know, these political tendencies are very extreme, and also, like, you know, like if you want to have a reasonable take on any of them, you have to do a lot of reading. And I can't imagine that these like teenagers are doing a whole lot of reading to come to them. And so I was kind of trying to show them that politics isn't just like a series of like symbols you slap on yourself and say that you are, but it's part of like a developing personal philosophy that then there is probably a label that is closer to what you believe in, but it's not like it's not like the tendencies exist and then you glom onto them. You develop as a person, and then you find the tendency that is the closest fit. And yeah, that was sort of a thing that I kind of wanted to. That was kind of a thing that I kind of got into. I don't know if anyone knows any of this stuff, but I imagine that there's people, especially like the kind of younger people who are on the Discord server, who have a much more intimate knowledge of these kinds of people. I think that there's sort of like, there's probably even like some people who have some of those tendencies in the Step Back audience. And so I tried to make a reach out. It was the political compass must die was my attempt to reach out to young people, to the young Zoomers, and be like, hey, it's okay to make your own decisions and to not have a political opinion until you feel like you have really come to something that you understand. Yeah, I think I tried to mention in the video too that there's a high crossover with these people, with the Hearts of Iron community, especially the Kaiserreich community. And I think we've had this chat on the stream before, because some parts of the Kaiserreich fandom make me very uncomfortable, because it's like they've made like little factions around these political tendencies that have very real world consequences, but they don't seem to like again, like treating the political tendencies that they believe in, which are steeped in your concept of like who should and should not have power and like what role violence in the state should play in the world, but they kind of treat it like their favorite genre, like the way that we would have treated, like, you know, the pop punk and the emo kids would have been the sort of, you know, the way the pop punk and the emo kids would have like identified themselves in high school. Yeah. Who knows? It was a thing. It's a thing that I definitely I was very moved about, and I wanted to talk about. Just like how my next video that's coming out, while it's less explicitly about it now, was about this. It is hopefully going to be me trying to reach out to fans of that one specific Twitch streamer / YouTuber, and try to say to them, hey, like, maybe the person who, maybe the right person isn't just the person who is the most confident and belligerent in their political opinions. Like, sometimes there's people who know that if you act confident and you act like a jerk and you sort of give off this display of performative lack of empathy, that a certain type of young influenceable person will think that person is really smart. And there is a certain political, there's several, but there's one specifically in mind of a political Twitch / YouTube personality who does all of those things, so people take him very, very seriously, but has a habit of not doing very good research and making very extreme takes on things like, say, the Land Back movement or black nationalism, that are based on not doing research, and their entire education seems to come from inviting people into these WWE style yelling matches that they pretend are debates, and basically just browbeating and sending their fans on harassment campaigns against people that they determined weren't portraying confidence or assholishness or performative lack of empathy enough for them to be taken seriously on the debate. So they had their lives, you know, fucking made annoying as shit by fans of these influencers. And so I was like, hey, here is a video that is going to, hopefully, in a non-judgmental way, address why the Land Back movement is not this extraordinarily stupid mischaracterization that certain Twitch creators have been trying to portray it as, and that maybe that should start you thinking about what other opinions do I have that are being shaped by a guy who has hundreds of thousands of followers and decides that doing 5 minutes of Wikipedia research is enough to be able to be an authority on that subject to those hundreds of thousands of people. It's another case where there are people with massive audiences who don't take responsibility for the weight that their words are going to have on those audiences. That's... Hopefully that... Does that make sense? Am I piecing it together correctly? Speak for yourself. I graduated high school right before the time emo was becoming a thing. Before then, nu metal was the genre for weird boys. Yeah, I mean, when I was in high school, the main things were like, you got your screamo, you know. When I was in high school, Alexis on Fire was really big. I think that they got like popular everywhere, but they were local for us. So Alexis on Fire was really popular. It was around the time that the Blink-182 self-titled album came out, and everyone listened to that for like 3 straight years. It was around the time that American Idiot came out, and everyone was really into that. And on top of that, it was also, I was really into like power metal, and we had like our little gang of people who loved Finnish power metal instead of like, you know, everything that everyone else was listening to. So, and we all defined ourselves by that shit, right? When you were a teen, the big music movement you were into was ska. Were you like a teen in the 90s? Were you like a teen when like Real Big Fish and No Doubt were the big bands? Or is this a different time? Believe it or not, he actually has a BA in sociology. Well, la-di-da. Maybe use that to do some fucking research! And before you try to say that the Land Back movement is a ethnic cleansing campaign, you read literally anything on the subject instead of your entire education being, I'm going to take a Land Back person who has never been in one of these spaces before, have them come on the stream, and then I just scream at them with a bunch of rhetorical gish gallops, and then I'll declare that I won because I managed to be more confident, more of an asshole, and perform a lack of empathy stronger than they did. And that means that my audience thinks that I won. And then I'm going to spend the rest few months taking my audience and telling them to harass and demean the people because they weren't able to be enough of an asshole who was confident and portrayed a lack of empathy on the stream enough. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, it's just it's. I know that I've got what's it called? I've got VDS or whatever. I just, God, that guy pisses me off so much. And yeah, I know you guys are sick of hearing about it, so I'll move on. People were talking about how there's some discovering you're a leftist deep down buried under layers of social conditioning, similar to getting your autism diagnosis. Yeah, I mean, there's a sense that being a leftist at your core is just having, just generally being a kind and empathetic person, and then realizing that that has a label will then make you decide whether you're going to embrace that label with all the controversies that come with it, or if you're going to, you know, then actively downplay your sense of common humanity and empathy in order to fit in with the political consensus of society. Alrighty. I do have a couple questions, so maybe I can get into those. There's two. I want to know, let's say I want to know more about the history of a specific event or place. How do I know which books are reliable and which ones are incorrect or embellishing pop history? Good question, actually. Kind of fits into the topic that I was just discussing. First things first is it'd be really good if you figure out that basically every field, if you think about it, every historical discipline is a extended conversation that has been going on for sometimes centuries. So the good thing to do is to find out who are the currently working people in that field who are publishing stuff about it. Like if you want to know about a specific event or a place, something like going like a good site, and everyone's going to give me shit for this, but a good site is going to the Wikipedia article for it and looking at what the major works in the citations at the bottom are, and looking for things specifically that come from academic presses. Lots of universities have their own presses, but if you find an academic press and books that are being published in that space, you can either read those books, but sometimes they're hard to find and expensive, or look up the authors who are publishing books in academic presses and see if they're publishing anything for more public consumption. And you're probably going to get the more high quality stuff out of that. That's like the main way that I would do it. And then, then once you've like delved into that, you can kind of look in the footnotes to see if there's any ways that the conversation's going through. The other thing you can do too is if you want to get a vibe for like whether a certain book or a certain idea of something is commonplace, like look up the book and look up like reviews. Lots of times people write reviews of books for academic journals, and will usually like make you'll get a lot better idea of what like the fault lines and the disagreements on a discipline are in a place like that. Let's see. Do you have any thoughts on the UBI bills currently in the Senate and House of Commons? I'm worried that leftists in Canada aren't pushing for these enough because they're getting lost in the noise of everything happening right now. Yeah. So I am curious about this. So if anyone doesn't, so for those people who don't know, the Liberal government has, how much context do I need to put on this? Okay. So for anyone who doesn't know, Canada is kind of economically super duper duper fucked. That is the best way that I can describe it. So here's what's going on. Canada is having an economic catastrophe that is slowly unraveling in one of like the biggest disasters financially for our country in a long time. Because Canada has, compared to the United States, a much higher debt to GDP ratio. So Canadians in general are a lot more in debt than they are than their American counterparts. The reason for that being is that in the post-2008 recession period, when our interest rates were really, really low, that resulted in a runaway inflationary spiral when it came to mortgages. That means that in a lot of places in Canada, especially the Toronto area and the Vancouver area, real estate prices ballooned beyond recognition to heights that are absolutely insane and were known by everyone to be unmanageable. And then, in response to rising inflation rates during the sort of last year or so, the government of Canada, or the Bank of Canada, raised interest rates, which means that a lot of people who are locked into these mortgages are going to end up paying a whole lot more for their mortgages and walking away from it. And it's probably going to lead to a little bit of a housing price collapse in like a lot of the major housing markets in Canada. Sounds which to a lot of people who have mortgages, that means that they're going to lose a lot of their money. And a lot of people, because of how long real estate was this very hot commodity, a lot of people have a lot of their money tied up in real estate. And so to the point where real estate is the number one source of GDP growth in Canada. It is our like number one resource, which is wild. That's insane. No country should do that. That is not a sane thing for a country to do. With it collapsing, it means that housing prices are falling apart. It's like almost impossible to sell a house right now, and it's probably going to get worse for a while before it gets better, because yeah, housing is collapsing right now, and there's talk about lowering our interest rates, but Canada's economy is not roaring back to life in the post-pandemic sort of boost that a lot of other countries are getting. So they can't really lower interest rates too much, but they can't raise them too much either. And there's something is going to fucking snap in this country, because basically what we have is a completely unsustainable economy, and a lot of people's money is tied up in money that or into assets that have no actual value. So that's fun. That's super great. I love that for all of us. So that means, and furthermore, because of some economic factors, but also because the Weston family are basically the heads of a fucking grocery store cartel, grocery prices and various other cost of living things have also just gone way up in price. Like, everything doubled in price in Canada in the last like couple years. To the point where now, like, the Weston family are like now the most hated people in the entire country, because they're basically just squeezing people out of all of their money, and then just saying inflation and getting away with it. So that's fun. That's super fun. So during all of that, because our economy is not recovering, and also because of all this stuff, these problems, the governing party is losing a lot of its support. The Liberal Party is suffering in the polls really bad right now. Now, there's not going to be an election for quite a while. They're in a minority government, but they have a kind of agreement with the NDP that will keep them, as long as the NDP doesn't break that agreement, the Liberal Party is probably going to stay in power until the next election, which would be in 2025. But, you know, politics is fickle. The NDP could always break rank, and we could have an election at any time. So, the Liberals are trying to look for new things that they can do to differentiate themselves from the NDP and have them not be like, you know, your typical, you know, price controls, rent control, those kinds of things that would make sense, but instead go for bold new ideas that can get the young people to support the Liberals. And one of the things that they're going for is, one of the things they're trying to do is push for a UBI program. There was a pilot program for UBI in Ontario until Doug Ford killed it. But in that pilot program, there was a lot of signs that it was very successful. And a recent study came out, because PEI is considering putting in its own UBI system, that if PEI were to put in a UBI system, it would decrease poverty in the province by like something like 80%. So basically, the Canadian, the Liberal Party put out a thing to the Senate and to the House of Commons to develop a UBI bill. And it's currently being kind of, you know, slapped around, tweaked, you know, like the final form of what it's going to be is still a ways off. They're still like developing what this is going to look like, if it's going to be a thing at all. Probably perfectly timed for the 2025 election, if I were to guess, so that they can use it as a selling point against the Conservatives. Because the Conservatives are defaulting back to, like, you know, your kind of old arguments about why UBI is bad, and they're not really landing. So that is sort of where Canada is at the moment. And I don't know where its future lies. Because there's a few ways you can look at it. One, if it got passed soon, that would be great. I would be happy with that. I'm pretty pissed off at the NDP for friggin' the way that they fucked up their response to Palestine. So I'm not feeling especially loyal to them at the moment. And I would welcome a UBI program, even if the Liberals passed it. And furthermore, like, it would have some pretty good impacts on my life, because, you know, I don't know if I've talked too much on this channel about this kind of stuff, but, you know, Step Back is making the same amount of money that it has for a very long time, more so even, but the cost of living has gone up so much that I basically can't afford to keep doing this for very long anymore. And I'm currently like trying to go and find a job so I can enter back into the workforce, because basically I'm just not making enough. I'm not making enough on YouTube to continue doing it full time, and so that is, and if a UBI program came into place, that might actually stop that process, but who knows? The timelines probably won't line up for me anyway. But it would be great. And I don't know what would actually come out of it, because we don't know anything about how it's going to be means tested, or how it's going to be like how it's going to be handed out, what kind of effects it's going to, like what kind of price controls are going to be put in place to make sure that it doesn't just result in everybody's landlords increasing everyone's rent by the amount that your UBI is every month, and see what we can actually do. But there's been very promising studies that shows that it could be very, very positive for a lot of people. And there's at least some real political will to make it happen. And I do think that it also came, not surprisingly, it came not long after Justin Trudeau went to one of those AI, he went to some like AI summit with a bunch of other world leaders, and he came back with like the UBI pitch, which I feel like if it happens in Canada, like there's going to be a lot of countries that follow suit at a certain point, because Canada usually does what every other country is going to do in like 10 years. You know, when we like legalized cannabis in 2018, or when we legalized gay marriage in 2005, UBI might be another example of that. And I think that it's probably like just in time, because I actually do think that once the large language model AI stuff starts to really mature as a technology and find itself in like more parts of our daily life, that the amount of labor that is needed to make the economy function is going to be way smaller than the amount of people that there are to do labor. That already has been the case for a while, and we've tried to cover that up by making a lot of fake jobs, or by making a lot of or by just, you know, letting people be miserable. But the numbers are getting too far out of alignment now, and I think that the Canadians are realizing right now that like the economy is not going to come back for us in a very big way like you did in the past, and if we don't do something very major soon, we could see ourselves in a basically an economic depression. And something like a UBI program would help with developing new people to start new businesses, to get more education, to stay economically stable as they pivot to new careers, or just do more volunteer work, or whatever really comes out of it. So we'll see what happens. I do think that the evidence shows that it would be extremely beneficial to society. I just hope that the things that I'm concerned about is that very often it's used to take away people's benefits, like for things like disability benefits, or like like unemployment benefits and stuff like that. And obviously, in order to make that kind of system make sense, those things are going to have to be like reevaluated as to what their role is and how much they're going to be. But I could very easily see a neoliberal state using a UBI program as a way to overall reduce the amount of money that people who have disabilities or people who are out of work would get. And we'd have to figure out whether whatever they're paying out is going to be enough so that you can actually survive and pay rent and eat food while, you know, being on basic income. We'll see. I don't exactly know what that number is going to be yet, but because everything is still kind of in the works. And I also hope that they're not like investigating like making it means tested, because there was this whole idea that they might make so that, like, you know, if you're making more than $1,000 a month working, then you don't need your $1,000 a month. But I would argue that that is incentive for a lot of people to just not look for work. So I hope that that doesn't, like, it's the fact that it has no strings attached is a very important part of the process, and I hope that they don't do something stupid in order to make more conservatives sign on to it. That makes it not work. The other thing too is that UBI in Canada also is a UBI is also a thing in Canada that would they said that it's going to be available to people who are 17 and older, which sure, maybe, I guess that makes sense to a certain extent. There kind of already is a UBI for children anyway, which is called the child tax benefit or whatever. But even so, that's only like a few $100 a month. But yeah, so like those are the things that are currently. The current bill would also require the framework to not be means tested. That would be good. That is a thing. We'll see what happens to the bill when it actually like is getting close to being voted on. But like, I don't know. I've been, like, I gotta say, as someone who has a kid in daycare, I've had politics come through for me in a very real and material way in the last year. So maybe Canada could actually pull off a basic income program, and that would be pretty rad. But yeah, the other thing, yeah, as Matt's pointing out in the chat there, or sorry, as 255's pointing out, is that the other thing that makes UBI a problem, or that will make UBI hard to maintain as a program, is that, yeah, maybe it'll be nice when the Liberals put it into place, but what is to keep, like, then it just becomes a political hot potato that then any, like, austerity government is going to immediately start clawing back in order to, clawing back or not increasing in accordance with inflation in order to save government spending, which would be really shitty. The only thing that I could think that might be a savior to that is that, like, UBI once implemented will probably become very popular very fast. And kind of like how every time even the most conservative, like, American politicians try to fuck with, like, Social Security, it always, like, backfires. That a universal program like a UBI program might become politically dangerous to fuck with once implemented and people actually get used to living on it. But I do think that could happen. I think that UBI, if implemented, would be life-changing to a lot of people. And if the conservatives consider cutting it, I definitely think that it would be politically unpopular. The only thing that I do think that might make it that they could do, and this is probably more likely to happen than not, is that a UBI system could be put in place, but if the amount of payments that are going out are not tied to some sort of, like, you know, living wage index, or some sort, if they're not tied to some sort of cost of living index, or some sort of, like, you know, anything that changes with inflation. If there's something that's not, if it's not a dynamic number, but like a set, if it turns out being like a set number, like $1,000 a month, that will be over a long period of time a number that goes down and makes it harder to live on, not easier. And in the future, it might be politically harder to say with a set number like that, be like, all right, it's time to increase the UBI. But, like, the Tories are in charge, so they're not going to increase the UBI, so everyone's just going to kind of get more and more poor over time. If it's tied to some sort of cost of living index, then you have to deal with a lot of issues about the fact that, like, that would mean that, you know, UBI payouts to people who live in Toronto would be way higher than someone who lives in, like, Petawawa or something like that. but something that would mean that at least it's tied to inflation, so that the UBI doesn't end up becoming effectively less money every year. But we'll see. Kind of, yeah, basically, as Tarbox pointed out, exactly like the minimum wage. The minimum wage is effectively always going down every year that it does not get raised. And because it's not tied to any sort of financial indicators, it's just a flat number. But I also am not convinced that those are insurmountable problems. Like, if UBI ends up being really popular and the dollar amount of payouts are dynamic instead of static, and even if it is static, for a good number of years, it'll still be, like, as Tarbox pointed out, like, society changing money. Like, there's a lot of people, like in a pilot study that was done in Ontario, but like even in like the PEI experiment, there's like good evidence that like a UBI program would reduce poverty by as much as 80%, which is like, even if it's like, you know, there's like long-term concerns, reducing poverty by 80% is so good that it is like, it would be considered a moral imperative to do that. Even if it had its issues, even if it had, you know, issues with long-term viability, the idea to make 80% of people who are currently in poverty not be in poverty anymore is like it's a moral requirement to do. And it would be, it's like, that would be a thing. There would definitely be long-term issues. Like, I do think that one of the things that UBI does open the door for is a evolving of the economy, which I think is the way the economy is evolving anyway. And there's, without like, you know, a very hardline socialist government, we're not going to really be able to change it. But like, the economy is already moving towards like a less stable, more precarious, and also more flexible and dynamic form of employment. Like, you know, you see it today in some parts of the service sector. You see it with like, you know, your Uber drivers, your like, you know, food delivery guys, those kinds of jobs. And I could see that model of employment becoming more normalized and entering into more areas of society that typically were reserved for people who had salaries. And if there was a UBI program that meant that, like, you know, you had fewer people whose like livelihoods were dependent on maintaining a stable, like, salaried job, that a lot of that would be that a lot of like jobs that could be part of the salaried could move to, like, could be gigified in a way. And like, that's not great because, you know, UBI is probably not going to be a thing that people will be able to live, you know, lives of dignity and you know, have like sort of the things that they need on. But I think it's going to result in that a lot of people are going to not be employed with like a job in the way that we think about it today, and a lot more people are going to cobble together a bunch of different gigs and things, which I would argue is so my argument to that is that's not good, and I don't like that is the way that the economy is moving, because it's an economic system that is even less stable than it is today. But I will also say that unless Canada is prepared to implement some really, really, really intense economic regulations that I would like, but a lot of people wouldn't vote for, that it's the way that the economy is moving anyway. And at least with a UBI system, that there is a base that you can start with. And if everyone's going to have to be gig economy workers, I would rather that everyone was getting cut a check that at least made sure that they, you know, they kept their homes and that they kept food on their tables, while they were bouncing between all these different things. That's the sort of thing. Okay, let's see. As a disabled person, my biggest fear for UBI is that it would be used to remove disability benefits and disabled people having even less access to what we need. Yeah, that is true. There's two ways I can look at that. One, yeah, it could definitely be used to cut back on disability benefits. So the amount of like money that you would be given through disability programs might be like taken away. I'm hoping there's two ways of. I know this just sounds like me being a bit of a devil's advocate, but I am trying to see ways that this might help. So there's two things I could think of. One, maybe disability benefits would go away, but like, or at least like the sort of just straight up disability payments might go away, or they'll be replaced with the UBI payments. And there is something to the idea that if the money that you're making, instead of being like from like, like literally being like your disability check and going to a universal check, that other people who are not disabled being invested in the same system that also pays you, that does give it a little bit more political, stability in a way. Two, it might mean that the current disability programs that we have in place could change their missions away from, instead of managing the sort of monthly checks, they could focus their mission more on making sure that people with disabilities have access to other resources that are not just money to make sure that their needs are taken care of. Obviously, people with disabilities have a myriad of needs in order to live their life. They have, like, obviously, depending upon what kind of disability you have, there's all sorts of accommodations and things that you need in order to have the life you deserve. And if maybe, like, if these disability programs were less focused on, cutting these checks and more focused on like implementing those services that you need on top of you getting your basic income to pay for, the cost of living, it might end up with a situation where you're at least you're getting slightly better off. But it's obviously a very optimistic reading of it. That is one way that I could interpret it. Hopefully that makes sense. Like, I obviously the most optimistic way that UBI could help people with disabilities is that they would have their the checks that they get for their for living off of would be in a much more politically stable situation, because it's not this is the check that goes to the people with disabilities, and if someone's not disabled, they might not be as inclined to vote for politicians that will make that number go up or keep it stable or improve it or whatever. But if it's for everyone, as a universal program, that means that everybody would be invested in it being good and getting better. The second thing too is that, the mission scope of what our disability services could have its resources taken away from the sort of the monthly check angle and going more towards like providing the services and things that they need, or at least giving them the resources to get the services that people with different disabilities need to function. Because I know a lot of people in Ontario with disabilities, their ODS checks fucking suck. They can't live off them. They are poverty amounts of money, and they're subject. They're they don't get increased. They're subject to cuts because people don't vote for people who aren't disabled are less likely to vote for governments that are willing to increase disability payments. That might change things. That might change the calculus in a way, but we'll see. Government entities are very critical on what we need while not knowing our situation, so the money is usually better. Yeah, fair. I do think that I do like I said, and as Tarbox even pointed out, like UBI is definitely not like a panacea that is going to solve all of the problems of society, but I do think that our society as it is now and society with UBI, like the average standard of living for everybody will increase by a lot. The world that has basic income is a better world than the one that doesn't. And I would rather be the person who advocates that UBI doesn't go far enough, but still having UBI, than being the person who doesn't live in the world with UBI, who wants, people to, who doesn't like. I was just talking to my barber the other day about how like I would like a world where we live in, a world that we live in, to not have people who are freezing to death because they have to live in a fucking tent by the river in a city where it is below zero for like 4 or 5 months of the year. We have London has a massive homeless population, and there's like homeless people are dying in the cold weather all the time in this country. It's a cold country, and we don't have proper infrastructure to help people with homelessness. And UBI would help a lot of those people improve their lives and get out of these dangerous situations. So even if I have like issues with like how it would be implemented, how do we make sure that it's just, how do we make sure that it's tied to increasing like inflation and such, even so, the world that has less people dying because they tried to huddle from the cold in like a porta potty at a construction site and froze to death in there, the better. I hope. I know that like, at the end of the day. And I would love to be the person who then, I would love to live in the country where our political debates are whether or not the UBI goes up. That is a political disagreement that is in a better world than whether or not people should have enough money so that they do not die. Because if we have to live in a world where you have to have money to not die, I would prefer that everyone got not dying money. If not implemented in a disability-inclusive way, UBI will probably increase standard of living at the cost of the standard of living of disabled people. So we would need community action. It's definitely a thing that we would need to be aware of. I'm hoping that it would not do that, but because especially for like I'm hoping that yeah, obviously. I do think there's another thing too that Bubbles pointed out, that is that if we got UBI and it got popular, people would, it would be like the first time in a very, very long time where the government would implement a new program that would actively improve people's lives and might make more people more amenable to the idea that, hey, collective action actually can improve things. You mean like governments can actually do things that make life better? Can we do more of that? And also, I would like it if UBI also changed our societal focus, where somebody's value as a human being is not tied to them being able to work. There's like maybe some like broader social changes that might come out of a system like that. Pierre Poilievre would try to get rid of UBI if he wins the next election. Maybe, yeah, that's true. The thing is, would it be politically possible by the time PP becomes prime minister? And two, if Trudeau passes a UBI system, are we even worrying about PP becoming prime minister anymore? It could be that that if this passes and it's popular and it works really well, that it could be very, very good for Mr. Trudeau. sorry for being kind of an anti-doomer. No. You're, what's it called? You're advocating for your voice. That is an important part of the world. I would say to you that there's a thing I say to my wife a lot, because my wife can be anxious sometimes, and I always say, like, hey, how about we worry about problems when they're problems instead of things that could theoretically be problems. It's definitely something that we need to keep our eyes open, and we need to be aware of, and we need to make sure is part of our advocacy when such a program is talked about. I think that it would be, I think that this kind of concern should be a concern, but that it is, and a way that we should use our voice in order to change policy, but as a way to shut down policy or to be against said policy is it's kind of like with the AI thing. Like, AI has a lot of very complex ethical ramifications. It has a bunch of environmental ramifications. It has there's a whole lot of like regulatory stuff that needs to be put in place in order for AI to function in our society and not cause disaster. Does that mean that we should not implement this technology, that we should not invest in it, we should not advance it? No, because while there are concerns, they are not unaddressable concerns. Like this problem about how do we make sure that people with disabilities do not get abandoned if we move to a UBI system. That is a very tractable problem. That is a solvable problem. That's not a thing that makes UBI an impossible thing. It would just mean that we would need to advocate for that when the bill is being put into process. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm just in a bad mindset after the election here in the Netherlands. That is, I don't know what's going on in the Netherlands. I know there was an election a couple days ago or yesterday, and that people seem very unhappy about it, but I don't know the details. Mm-hmm. But yeah. The other thing too, like if I made I could think of like what would Tristan do if he had UBI right now? One, probably buy a few more things. If I had $1,000 a month more every month, I would probably pay off my debts. That's probably the number one thing I would probably do. To keep Step Back going, I've had to dig myself into a little bit of a line of credit that is getting a little concerning. But I would dig myself out of that. Maybe buy a few more board games sometimes. And one of the things that I would do in the future is if I could, I would probably do an equation to see about how much a video, like profit margins and stuff like that. And I would probably do some work to hire editors, like freelance editors, and such, so that the videos could look better and come out faster. And also, that would mean that I would be giving some freelancers some extra money. So, and that's just like one tiny example. There's all sorts of little examples. Like there are people who would use this opportunity so that they can spend more time with their kids, maybe move to part-time or half-time and spend more time taking care of their kids, and that their kids could have a better childhood and then end up in a more stable situation when they grow up. Two, like somebody could say if they get laid off from their job, if somebody gets laid off from their job, they could hold out because they know that they're going to be able to make ends meet, that they could hold out for a better job, which means that they don't need to take desperately whatever the next job is handed to them, which would in a net effect, would increase wages, because people would have to pay more in order to entice people to, not just stay on basic and move into and do something more. It would mean that people would be more invested into their own education, into starting businesses, into volunteering. I think one of the studies with the UBI showed that a lot of people who got these UBI checks spent a lot more time doing volunteer work and stuff that actually helps the community. So there's a lot of benefits that can come out of something like that. Geert Wilders is going to be prime. Oh my god, that is bad. Jeez. Which is like 6 months ago, we were considering potentially moving to Amsterdam. So that is terrifying. Depending upon where, yeah. I guess now my thought of going to Brussels might be more likely. Ugh. Wait, that weird ANCAP got elected president of Argentina? Jesus Christ. Or is that a different... Am I thinking of a different guy? There was some guy who was running in some election that was like straight up like ANCAP. Dear God. Well, that's going to be a disastrous thing. I just realized we're running out of time. I got one more question. All right. Speaking of the unnamed streamer, do you have any do you think debates ever make sense as a method of discourse? Not even just Twitch, YouTube stuff. Like, I don't even watch the presidential debates most of the time because I expect them to be rehearsed sound bites. All right. I'll answer this quick question and then I realize that we're out of time. So my answer to that is that debates can be useful. I have participated in debates that have been useful, but they need to be structured. They need to be they need to be structured, and they need to have specific rules, and they need to be with people who actually know what they're talking about, and actually be like Oxford style, structured debates about a very specific topic. Just being like, this guy, debate this guy, is a fucking waste of time. Presidential debates have just turned into talking past each other, and it's pointless. So, but debate is super important, and I do think that there is value, because there's this whole thing called cognitive dissonance theory, or dissonance theory, or I just finished reading a book called Mistakes Were Made But Not By Me, and we have a psychological defense mechanism where we go to extreme lengths of self-rationalization in order to defend the decisions that we make. And one of the most, one of the things that studies have shown way more often than anything else helps people change their actual positions is consuming counter information, like information that challenges their views many, many, many times, and in a situation where they do not feel like they are losing face by changing positions. So fairly often, things like debates, where somebody who disagrees with you is likely to hear your positions, but from a vantage point where they do not feel personally challenged or personally attacked by your positions, like if you say you were talking to them one by one, that could be part of their journey to changing their mind. So there is that. Okay, guys, it is 2:00. This time flew by. Vyvanse has made streaming so much easier for me. You guys, I'll be back on December 1st, most likely. December 1st is when, inshallah, my next video comes out, so that'll be really exciting. Land Back is good. I think what's it called? I wrote a title. I got a title that got a stamp of approval from Jacob Geller, so I'm pretty happy about it. But the current title that I'm going with is, let me just get it for you. The current title that I am working with is "This Entire Continent Was Stolen. What do we do about that?" And so that is that's the current that's the current title I'm going with, and I'm pretty excited about it. I feel really good about the script, and next week that video should be coming out. Who knows? And of course, I'll be 35 next Friday because Tristan's birthday is on Monday, so yay me. But yeah, as we always say over and over again on this stream, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I got one more. I got an anti-doomer thing I'll add to the end here. Take care of yourself, take care of each other, and it's not over till it's over.